All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Money Moves, tips, tricks, and advice on procurement and interoperability for school districts. While people are coming in, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, what you do, and where you are right now, and we will get started shortly. If you're just joining us, we're so excited to have you with us for Money Moves. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, your organization, and where you're from, and we'll get started in about a minute. Right, I think we're going to get started. Welcome to Money Moves, tips, tricks, and advice on procurement and interoperability for school districts. We're thrilled to have you with us. This is part 2 of our Money Moves series. A couple weeks ago, we had an amazing conversation with some folks about federal funding and putting that to good use. And now we're here talking about procurement and interoperability in school districts. We have a great panel of folks here today to speak with you. From Project Unicorn, we are dedicated to advancing interoperable solutions in K-12 ed tech. And we are excited to be working with the Council of the Great City Schools and Portland Public School District for this conversation. Our speakers today are going to be Susan Bearden, the Director of Digital Programs at Project Unicorn, Sharyar Kazay, advisor of the Council of Great City Schools, and Don Wolf, the Chief Technology Officer for Portland Public Schools. We are going to first sort of welcome and introduce the conversation. Susan's going to lead us in a quick discussion of procurement and interoperability. Then Sharyar is going to talk with us about the interoperability program overview over at the Council of the Great City Schools. And then we're going to have a roundtable discussion based on some questions about procurement tips, tricks, and advice. We'll take your questions, and then we will close things out. So please ask questions in the chat, get involved, start conversations, and we will start directing those questions and then engagement to the group as we move forward. Really excited to have you here, and we're going to get started. But before we do, what we want to talk to you about is an initiative that Project Unicorn is starting called the School System Data Survey. We're really trying to take the pulse of data usability and readiness in school districts across the country. So please fill out the survey. It doesn't take very long at all. You're going to see the resource pop up in the window here. The survey takes very little time, and every person who takes the survey receives an Amazon gift card. So we really appreciate your help. Please click the link, take the survey, and we're very excited to have you participate in the survey and in this session today. And without further adu, I'm going to turn this over to Susan. Susan?
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Bearden. I am the Director of Digital Programs for Innovate EDU, which is the parent organization of Project Unicorn. And as Jonathan mentioned, Project Unicorn is dedicated to promoting interoperability, data interoperability in the K-12 space, providing support and resources for both school systems and vendors. And one of the things that's kind of unique about our organization is that we have a steering steering committee comprised of 16 fabulous organizations in the ed tech space, everybody from standards bodies to education member organizations and some organizations doing work in the privacy space. And Council of Great City Schools is one of our partners and a member of the Project Unicorn Steering Committee. So there is a group of organizations that are doing work around interoperability in the K-12 space, developing resources to help districts and vendors along on their journey towards interoperability. And so I'm really excited to hear today to have our guests talk about interoperability and procurement and best practices for making sure that interoperability is included in your procurement process. And just to give you a few little highlights of why procurement is such an important process when it comes to interoperability is that, well, first of all, as we all know, procurement is a very complicated and multi-layered process, and lots of districts have different processes in place, and there's a lot of stakeholders that have to be included in the process. And with technology in particular, one of the challenges is that not all technology purchases go through the technology department per se. Some might go through curriculum and instruction or what have you. So it's very important to kind of have agreed upon technology policies and procedures and make sure that those policies and procedures are followed and that you have buy-in from all the important stakeholders in your school system or district. And another reason that interoperability is so important is when you are developing RFPs for technology tools, it's important to include requirements about interoperability if you are looking for interoperable solutions, because that will ensure that the solution you get is going to be one that meets your needs with regard to data integration and interoperability. And our speakers today are going to talk about how you can make sure that you have the correct requirements in your RFPs. And also from the Project Unicorn perspective, we are working to try and push the field and vendors more towards interoperable solutions. And procurement is a very important way to do that because the market responds to the needs of its customers. And if more and more districts are including interoperability requirements in their RFPs, then that makes it much more likely that vendors are going to be responding to those RFPs and including interoperability requirements as they are developing their products and making that kind of integration available. So we're very excited to be presenting this webinar today, and I am thrilled to turn things over to Shahriyar from Council of Great City Schools. I've had the pleasure of working with Shahriyar since I came on board with Project Unicorn last fall, and he is just an amazing source of great information, and it's a privilege to get to work with him and have him here. So Shahriyar, take it away.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for the kind words. So I just wanted to give you a little background about the program, we call it a CGCS's Interoperability Program. This is a coalition that was formed about November of last year after about a year of a lot of background analysis, review, and surveys and assessment. And the members are the Council of Great City Schools, obviously, the Council of Chief State School Officers, CCSSO, and the primary role as the leader in this coalition is the International Society of Technology and Education, ISTE. This was a grant that was funded by the Gates Foundation, the Dell Foundation, and the Zuckerberg Initiative, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And the primary focus of this was to improve the adoption of interoperability standards at the state education agencies and the local education agencies. And we'll go a little bit more detail on how that background review and analysis gave us the kind of information that it provided us and how this whole grant was formed, the scope of this grant was formed. So giving you a little bit of context, that there are over 700 edtech products that are used in our school districts. 8 out of 10 educators say that responded that they get their information by just doing web searches. So they don't really have a reliable source, a unbiased source of information about products and how they meet interoperability standards. And only 22 states provide any kind of guidance to procurement guidance to their districts. There's massive, as Susan mentioned, massive variation in procurement policies across districts and states. And they have identified, the CIOs and the state and district representatives that we surveyed, they identified privacy and interoperability as a primary barriers to effective implementation. In addition, state education agencies and CIOs identified, district CIOs identified interoperability and data privacy as a top priority for them. I think they totally realized the importance of availability of data and that efficiency that interoperability provides the school districts and state agencies. And as Susan mentioned, the whole Project Unicorn and its mission and proof of that priority and importance is that there are 600 district leaders and 150 companies that have signed, and probably that number is even higher, have signed on the Project Unicorn pledge, and you have the link to be able to think. So we definitely realize that there is time for change, and these three organizations, ISTE, CCSSO, and the Council, are very focused on interoperability. This is a Project Unicorn, and the memberships, as you can see, the standard organizations are very heavily involved, and they collaborate with each other and focus on this area. So as we were forming this grant application, took us a whole year to work on this. We did surveys. We had roundtable discussions in various conferences, both at the state education agency level and at the Council of Great City Schools, and also ISTE. And we gathered all this information from the various constituents, various involved, even the vendors and solution providers, to provide us input on what are the challenges, what are the issues, and how we can focus the grant appropriately. And what we came up with, what we heard, was that it would be really helpful if we have a coordinated effort. And that is why, even though this coalition is between CCSSO, Council, and ISTE, we are also joined at the hip with the Project Unicorn, with COSIN, and other organizations that are working towards this goal. We definitely, there's a need for a standardized procurement policies and practices, access to a consolidated, reliable, and meaningful information, as I said, unbiased repository about edtech products and how they meet privacy and especially interoperability standards. And also understanding clearly that you can't really implement and adopt interoperability standards without really reviewing and modernizing your underlying systems. And I think that's another challenging area, is that a lot of school districts, the systems are old and cannot meet the requirements for adoption of interoperability standards. So as a result, the scope of the grant, the way it was formed, was that it had 4 primary objectives. One was focusing on the model procurement policy. Objective 2 was that edtech product repository that we were talking about, that districts and state agencies can reference, provide detailed information about the edtech products and how they meet interoperability standards. Modernization and future readiness program, just assessing the existing systems and whether they meet the standards, can they even meet the standards, and obviously making sure that vendors have a voice in this, and we hear their challenges and their needs as they deal with the inconsistencies in procurement practices and policies. So as a result of this, establishing these 4 objectives, CCSSO and the Council formed the team, objectives 1 and 3, and we came up with a maturity model that addresses various areas focused on procurement, governance, and that would help the districts improve their underlying systems, as well as adopting policies and practices that would help at the adoption of interoperability standards. So the way the program that we have set up is, in this program, there are 20 member districts, council member districts involved. As you know, Council Great City Schools membership consists of 77 largest urban school districts in the country. So there are 20 districts involved. I think a couple of the member districts that are part of this program are on the call, Oklahoma City and Fresno. And so what we established was, over a 3-year program. It's actually a 3-year program. We do a baseline assessment of interoperability and privacy maturity. There's a worksheet that the school districts complete. We call it self-assessment. And then we follow that with a council team, me and 3 of my colleagues that are working on this program. We do a peer review. We like the districts to provide evidence if they rate themselves high in the maturity levels, and then once that review is completed, then we work with the districts in developing a roadmap in how they want to improve that maturity level and improve their adoption policies and procedures. And we encourage the districts to just don't take too big a bite, small steps towards, and then we do support them, because this is something that is fully supported at the high level with the Council of Great City Schools. And it was a request that was made through the superintendent. It has an enterprise level visibility, and we do support the districts, the technology department, to be able to implement changes in policies and practices. And also we encourage them to involve their peers, procurement side, the chief academic officer, chief procurement officer, chief operating officer, and involved as they go through this experience and this exercise. And then the following 2 years will be basically monitoring and supporting the district as they go through this experience. So what is this whole assessment, this maturity model is about? A little bit more detail. There are 6 different the domains that are involved, and each of these domains have a series of capabilities within them. So we start with leadership and vision, procurement, governance, technology and infrastructure, landscape, implementation, fidelity, and privacy. And the districts, participating districts, rate themselves 1 through 5 standard CMMI maturity model kind of logic, score themselves between 1 through 5 within each of the capabilities within each of these domains, and then decide on prioritizing initiatives that would help them. As you can see, a lot of this is the domains are not specific focused on projects, with the exception of technology and infrastructure landscape. A lot of focus is on policies, practices, collaboration, awareness at the organization level, and understanding the benefits of interoperability and how it can help all the way down to teachers and students and parents when information is readily available and can be used in making better decisions. As I said, districts have to provide evidence if they are rating themselves high on the maturity level. And we want to make sure that it is very well rooted in the organization. It's not driven through a champion kind of a process where if there is a turnover of staff, that then it would fade away and it will not continue. And as I mentioned, we do want the districts to include their peers in the process. So going into detail on the procurement domain, because this is our focus in here, these are the capabilities within the procurement domain. We want to make sure that there is a process governance is in place. It's that the district has a formal process for planning and prioritizing initiatives, and also including the stakeholders in that process, meaning the chief procurement officer, the technology officer are sitting at the table as initiatives, and other key areas, data and accountability, are sitting at the table and they are participating in prioritization and planning. Acquisition planning. When a decision is made that an initiative is going to be funded and go forward, how's that procurement acquisition strategy being done? And again, who is all involved? Again, a lot of focus in collaboration, making sure that interoperability is lifted above technology into the entire organization, and there is awareness, support, and adoption at the entire at the organization level. Then what we did was we split the formal evaluation and selection process from the informal evaluation and selection process. A lot of the districts are very mature in the formal evaluation process. RFPs, the terms and conditions are very well established, and there's good processes in place, fairly good processes in place. A lot of the EdTech products are not purchased through the formal process. They're purchased through informal evaluation. Districts purchase either directly at the school level. Schools have authorization to purchase products, or the district purchases products through some sort of a master agreement or some sort of an instructional material exemption. And sometimes these can become surprises for the technology department, or even expose the district to certain liabilities, privacy issues that we're not focused on, and then you have to go back into a negotiation after you have done the purchases. Terms of, and then not even mentioning the free products that are out there that cause a whole different set of issues. And then obviously terms of use and privacy policies. A lot of times apps that are downloaded online, you just have a checkbox that says, do you accept the privacy, the terms of use? Yes, no. Vendors have the flexibility to change those policies, reserve the right to change those policies without notifying you. These things have a lot of impact on privacy, student privacy. And I know there's a lot more awareness. There are federal, state regulations that the vendors have to follow. But I think having a process in place and monitoring or even negotiating those things is a wise thing to do. And obviously, application lifecycle management, maintaining a relationship with the vendor, making sure that you clearly understand the roadmap and where where they're taking their product and the support level. There will always be challenges, updates, upgrades that need to be done. Making sure that they are maintained, fully committed to interoperability, and continue on enhancing their product towards that. And last but not least, external organization impact. This is an area where the state agencies probably have to focus a lot more on, but we want the districts to also focus if there are other external agencies that they need to interact with, and how that impacts the whole contractual agreements and processes that they have to deal with. With that said, I'll pass it on to Susan. I think I'm done with my presentation, and we can start the next item on the agenda.
Excellent. Well, great. Now, in addition to Sharyar, I would like to give a warm welcome to Don Wolf, who is joining us today from Portland. He's the Chief Technology Officer with Portland Public Schools. Don, thank you so much for joining us.
Extend the offer.
Absolutely. So we have a series of questions for the two of you. And I guess the first one is, how do you get buy-in for procurement processes that include interoperability requirements?
I'm not sure sorry, we hadn't scheduled who's going to take the first one. So I'll jump in because
Go ahead.
Perfect.
Give Sharyar just a little bit of a break. One of the ways that we work on this here in Portland is we've had to reach outside of our department and make sure that we're communicating and working with we have a purchasing and contracting department, as well as communications and strong links of communications into the other departments, the teaching and learning side, facilities, Office of School Supports, Office of School Supervision, all of those different potential customers that are reaching out to purchase digital assets and or hardware, because there are interoperability concerns there as well, with depending on the type of hardware that you purchase, and making sure that they understand what it means to be interoperable. So Sharyar did a beautiful job of overlaying all of the domains and the broader context of this, but it's not just about moving data and making sure data it's really considered the interoperability of the district and how we work together, and making sure that you have those conversations and that you strategically put the stage gates in place, so that if something seems off or something seems like, oh, IT should be involved in this or have a conversation here, our contracting and purchasing folks know this, and what is the preferred language that should go in those RFPs and be the contract languages that come out of that.
Yeah, just in addition, I think making the topic less technical, and as you're interacting and working with the peers and colleagues across the district's organization, really try to explain the benefits in a way that it's not overwhelming and too technical. Interoperability really has clear benefits in the district, for the classroom, for the school district, for the principals, and that needs to be articulated in an easier, in a non-technical way, so that they have a better understanding of it and then can support you in its adoption.
Either of you, this isn't a formal slide question, but do either of you have any tips or tricks for how you frame interoperability in a non-technical way? Because I know that's something that, you know, we're always trying to do better at Project Unicorn.
Examples of, you know, well, I think that traditionally, when I used to work at LA Unified School District, our challenges were the amount of time that the teachers were spending uploading rosters and creating accounts for their students, and having to maintain that as well. And this was a responsibility I would take away from instructional time. So just being able to articulate how much instructional time can be saved by creating these efficiencies. That was one area that I always cited an example that would really benefit the classroom, the teachers, and the schools. And obviously, the other example is just the availability of data to be able to make good decisions, to be able to, get the insights and the information in a timely fashion. Something that can be easily done without costly implementation efforts.
Thank you, Sharyar. Don, did you have any other ideas for how to frame this conversation?
No, but I am loving the comment from Chris.
Yeah, me too.
About using Lincoln Logs, Tinker Toys, and Legos. Each is its own system, and they're not really interchangeable. And that when you find a way to interlink them together to be able to move data and processes around, that takes it out of the technical realm and into a concrete way. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely, Chris. Yes, and as we go along through the presentation, I would encourage the folks attending to feel free to jump in and add your ideas, suggestions, best practices as we go through the presentation today, so that we can all learn from one another. So thank you. And the conversation turns to, well, what framework should we adopt? Excellent, great, that's wonderful. All right, moving along. So, and I guess I will start with Don for this question. Don, does your district have a pre-approved list of EdTech products that meet your instructional and technical requirements? And if so, who participated in that effort and how is it maintained?
Yes, we actually do, and it's a living, breathing process. It's never finalized. It's never complete because there's millions of pieces of software out there that are free. It started with our procurement folks and somebody from our learning technologies department. They're the folks that live in IT that are focused on enhancing instruction with the use of technology and how to do that appropriately. And the goal was to make sure that there were at least a core set of applications that met our privacy standards. And the SDPC is the Student Data Privacy Consortium has been a huge help in focusing that conversation to make sure that we have contract language and that we can easily turn around vetting some of these applications, at least on a very specific element around privacy. And then also talking very broadly with our teaching and learning people, as well as teachers and principals in our buildings to say, this is why we need to go through. It's not just about the singular application, and it's not just about purely interoperability. There's also a security and a privacy element that we want to ensure that whatever we're allowing our students to access as an official and adopted piece of software or enhancement material, that we're not going to be selling student data and we're not going to be leaking student data inadvertently. The trick is, how do you maintain that, and how do you go back and understand those privacy policies? That's a bigger lift that we haven't perfected. So looking for any tips and guidance there, if anybody has any silver bullets.
Sharyar, do you have any silver bullets for this process?
Sure. We actually had a great experience at LA with collaborating with our chief academic officer and our chief procurement officer. We formed that cross-functional team, and we came up with a program. We call it the UDIP, UDIPP, Uniform Digital Instruction Procurement Plan. And it was, again, focused on instructional technology and edtech products. And it addressed technical requirements like authentication, authorization, rostering. It focused on instructional alignment, which the chief academics officer was very focused on. And then security and privacy requirements and interoperability requirements. And I know that a lot of the vendors were not too happy about it because they had to go through that process. It took us a little while to smooth out the process and making sure that it was streamlined process. But it really helped because then the schools had a repository of products that they could reference and utilize. It also gave us the ability to kind of monitor to see whether we are spending our money wisely. Are we buying the multiple products that provide the same functionality, and can we create that efficiency? And then, as I said, are they even taking it further? Are the products in use? And if they're not in use, do we need to discontinue the license? So that whole management, we address that in our maturity model in a different area, in the different domain. But is that monitoring, assessment, evaluation continuing or not, and being maintained, as Don mentioned, is that's really critical, because we do find that there are a lot of stale, obsolete software package apps that are still districts are still paying for, but they're not really using, or even consolidating licenses into one so that you can create that efficiency and lower the cost.
Excellent. And Chris added a question, and actually we can go ahead and take this question now because we're talking about this at this moment. His question is there an app that you use to perform those tasks?
We developed the process manually. At the time, there wasn't an app in place, but I think putting that workflow together is not very complicated. But I'm not aware of an app, but it would be very interesting to know if there is an actual app that is developed for that process.
I would be very interested as well. We have developed kind of our own in-house web application that, as it goes through, that it starts with a Google form. People fill out the request for something, it gets reviewed, it gets added to a larger Google Sheet database that gets presented on the web using different Google tools, so that it provides a rating, it provides a link to if there's an SDPC agreement in place, if it's allowed, if it's a free application or paid for, and does it support rostering by our current rostering method? But that was all created in-house. I'm not familiar with anything that you can purchase and configure to do everything that you want it to do.
I'm pretty sure there are software platforms out there that will allow you to monitor which apps are being used and how apps are being used. So that can be, those platforms can be used to determine, for instance, if an app is being actively used in your district. So if you were trying to make a decision, do we want to continue using that? You could do that. So I guess that would be part of the process, but it doesn't sound like there's a solution that kind of provides end-to-end coverage. For
definitely. Thank you, Susan, for clarifying that. I was focusing on the process for the evaluation of the software apps. But in terms of managing the, what you have purchased and how much is used, yes, there are several products out there that do that very nicely, and the information can be even extracted directly by the districts from either network logs or from other type of agents that they have running on their devices. But yes, there are products out there.
Yeah, from that end, we just got through a pilot process with one of those applications. Is it all right to mention those specifically here? I mean,
I think it's okay to mention them as long as we are not promoting any particular app or service.
No, not promoting it, but we were part of, through Digital Promise, gave us access to Catch On for the last year, and it does a great job of, you deploy the agent and it collects usage of who's going where and using what applications. And having that data was very helpful in making some decisions about what applications stay or don't stay in the portfolio of applications you want to move forward with.
I think ClassLink does the similar type of functionality as well. So more and more of these, I think vendors are realizing that this is something that's very much in demand, and they're providing that functionality in their products.
Yes.
Clever's also recently rolled out that similar ability.
Yeah, and I think Margaret just popped something in the chat about NetRef also providing some of that information as well. And thank you, Ashley, for sharing that you use an Adobe sign-in form to process your app approval workflow. That's very helpful, kind of similar to the Google form process. Interesting, excellent. All right, so moving along, and insight into the apps and workflows that we, the folks on this call, are using is very important, probably worthy of further exploration, and that is an excellent point, Chris. Thank you. We're going to flag that for perhaps a future webinar. All right, so our next question for the panel is, are the procurement and IT departments engaged at the early planning stages of acquisitions, and how have you been able to achieve this? Don, I'll kick it over to you first.
Take that down. You want to take that?
Never early enough. Never early enough. But we have been able to make that, if it's something that is not going to be a free application, that's going to require a purchase or a contract. So we have been able to work with our procurement office to put a check in there. And it's taken many years of conversations to get this, but whether it's a P card, if there's an application that's being purchased on a P card, they will flag it before it gets paid and say, and refer back to IT. If it's a larger RFP or an RFI or a request for proposal, or excuse me, invitation to bid process, there's a process in reviewing that before it goes out to the larger public audience of gathering up. We have a survey from a technical perspective that asks about rostering, authentication, interoperability standards, and what they support. And that has to be completed as part of this process and folded back into a more robust review from our security and operations team within IT to make a final, that goes in as part of the final recommendation on what application suites are available for purchase. So it's a great process. It's not bulletproof. There's, people are creative and find ways around it, and we play catch up with those from time to time. And those are just opportunities to educate and inform and in deeper people's understanding of how the process is supposed to work.
I love
Absolutely. Constant communication and this, interaction with the academic department and staying very close with them is very key to avoid any kind of surprises. And also being aware of where the district is going. And, we emphasize a lot on the CIO being at the cabinet level and sitting at the table when the strategic decisions are being made, because by nature, we can anticipate what is coming our way, and we can initiate those conversations with our peers about what their needs are and what their plans are. And that way you can, so the governance piece and the organization structure is also very key to make sure that this constant communication and awareness is happening.
Like so many other things, it all seems to come down to the human connection, and building on those relationships and making those connections between other organizations, and making sure that those silos don't exist, which I think is a problem in, I think, just about every organization I've ever worked in. That's always been a challenge. So I really liked how you reframed that, Dawn, in terms of an opportunity to educate users on the process and the reasons behind the process. That's a really great strategy for helping to get buy-in moving forward. All right, and I have more questions, and just want to check with Sharyar and Dawn. I think we were going to ask the formal questions, and then we were going to open it up for questions from our audience. But I really like the fact that we've been having the audience pop questions in the chat as we've been discussing various topics. So is it okay if we just kind of continue with that process?
Sure.
All right, so folks, as we are talking, instead of going through the formal part and then having a Q&A at the end, please feel free to pop your questions in the chat while we're going. I think it helps make for a more interactive presentation process. So now we have our next question, which is, what processes have you put in place to ensure purchases are aligned throughout the organization?
Do you want to go first, Sharyar?
Go ahead.
Well, that's a really big question, because in Portland Public Schools, we have worked really hard to develop a theory of action around our Black and Native American students, first and foremost, and that's our North Star is in everything we do. And so we've created a budgeting process over the last couple of years that highlights and focuses on our values as a district and what our strategic plan is going to be. And all of our purchases need, and wherever we spend money, whether it's on staffing, whether it's on reconstruction efforts, whether it's on purchasing of equipment, devices, software, needs to fall in alignment with that. And it's a grueling 3-month budget process to make sure that, the 50 to 75 people that come through the district that are part of that official process, from buildings, from central office, from different unions, are in alignment on how we're going to spend our money. And that this is a part of that. Now, when it gets down into the nuts and bolts, once we have that alignment on how we're choosing to focus our efforts on our students and the academics that we want to provide, the environments we want to provide, the opportunities we want to provide, then it becomes an extension of the process I discussed earlier of, here is a survey. If it's a software application, there's that process for entering into those contract agreements that pulls us back into that. Here's the official survey form, here's the technical requirements, and hopefully they're all aligned there. But it's got to start at the very top of what are we trying to accomplish as a school district? What does our strategic plan and our board goals say we should be focusing on? And everything else kind of falls away from that.
Just to add that, I think, we talked a little bit about it earlier, putting those processes in place where any kind of technology purchases, go through a checkpoint. And this is something that procurement needs to put in place through the ERP system, financial system of the district, so that when the purchases come through. But the key there is to not delay the purchases. And I think that's what frustrates the schools. So streamlining the processes and making sure that you're not creating unnecessary delays. Having that pre-approved list and making sure it's very well advertised and school principals are aware of it is very helpful. Making it easy for new products to be qualified and through a process is very key. I think that's where the frustration comes into play is delays and another level of bureaucracy, another red tape, process that needs to be adhered to, and that's what frustrates the schools. At the central level, I think that governance definitely needs to be in place, and we talk about it from all different angles. Overall enterprise governance, from the planning and prioritization of initiatives all the way down to the project management. That governance really needs to be in place and formalized so that the district commits to it long term and it roots itself in the organization.
Thank you, Sharyar. And I think you make such an important point about streamlining that process to make it easy for people to do the right thing. I think that is critical, because you're right. I have when I was teaching, I was in a very large district, and I'm familiar with that whole bureaucracy. From the teacher's perspective, I remember that frustration of feeling like I was beating my head against the bureaucracy when all I wanted to do was do something for kids. So thank you for making that point. I think you're right. It has to be a process that is easy for folks to use, that's not overly cumbersome, and yet still meets the guardrails and the checkpoints for making sure that the products you're purchasing are in alignment. So thank you for making that suggestion. All right, our next question, and what advice do you have for solution providers or vendors who want to grow their business in the K-12 market? I bet we could do an entire webinar just on this one question.
It's a segue to the next session, I guess.
Absolutely. And folks in the chat, feel free to chime in as well. So Sharyar and Don, what are your thoughts?
Maybe I'll go first. I think being aware of the various organizations that are involved in K-12, nonprofit, especially organizations. Project Unicorn is a clear example of it. The EdFi Alliance, the Council of Great City Schools, if you qualify, vendors don't need to worry about that. But ISTE, COSN, being involved and being aware and having your ear to what the needs are, what are the critical pain points that the districts are dealing with. These are topics that are discussed in webinars, in virtual meetings, and as well as conferences, and then regular conferences once we go back into the mode of being present in person. But being aware of that, so many times when I was at LA Unified, CIO at LA Unified, and I would encounter vendors that wanted to come and work with us, and I would ask them if they were aware of COSN or the council or ISTE, and it was very surprising for me that they weren't really in the loop. I think on the other side, we need to promote more of Project Unicorn. What features, some of the other organizations that Don mentioned that are active in this area, and they're constantly providing. There's just so much information available that vendors can benefit from. One of the things that I think was very clever, my friend CIO at Boston Public Schools, Mark Racine, did, was he does regularly. He calls in the vendors that are interested in doing business at his district once a year or periodically, and he briefs them about his technical expectations and standards, what direction they're going and what needs, and provides that forum for them to be able to hear and also provide feedback. And I think that's really something clever to do, especially in the larger districts, because vendors need to hear what the needs are.
Yeah. And if I were going to chime in on that, a couple pieces I would add. Privacy and security are paramount at this particular point in time. So make sure that you have a robust privacy policy, not just a one-liner. Make sure it's accessible. Make sure that we can see it and vet it and review it. Make sure that you can provide documentation of your SOC 2 Type 2 or any other security assessment that you've got on your infrastructure. By and large, nobody wants to do anything on-prem, so it's going to be in the cloud. So security is going to be paramount, and that you're not selling the students' data. I would, as a vendor, when we talk to vendors, we urge them, we push the SDPC process, because it provides them some assurance, but it also provides the district a level of comfort around what they will be doing with student data, and it makes it just easier for everybody. School districts are, no surprise to anybody on this call, understaffed and overworked, and so things that can take out some of that burdens that are solid and proven are great. The other thing is make it easier for us to move our data around. So if you're just new to this process, I will take on a Project Unicorn stance and say, you better have a very well-developed, highly secure API infrastructure so that it is established. So whether I'm a CIF or whether I'm an EdFi district, you can readily adjust and be able to move that data around. Do not be asking for flat file transfers of data. I mean, I'm still in a year 2 of a vendor that came in and said, oh, we can do this, and yes, we can get your data out, and we are still constructing that process for this vendor. So the bait and switch of, yes, we can do everything when you can't actually, and the only way you're really going to be able to be successful is by pulling out a CSV and uploading it somewhere else. That opens up so many security concerns. And so many second sources of the first round of truth that is not where we need to be. So develop that API infrastructure for your product.
Absolutely. And I'm here going, preach, Don, preach, yes. Absolutely. And thank you so much for making that great point about the exports to the flat files, because I think as more and more districts are demanding and that vendors be providing interoperable solutions. And yes, Chris, you make such a great point about most districts don't have a team of data engineers on staff to be able to take your data from a flat file and manipulate it and move it into their other systems. There are some of the larger districts that have larger teams but the overwhelming majority of districts do not have a huge IT staff, and there is there's not an abundance of highly skilled data engineers and data analysts in the K-12 space. I think it's fair to say that. And I agree 100% on the need for vendors to not, instead of like saying, oh yeah, we'll give you your data in a flat file and then you make it go from there. I would encourage you to make it as easy as possible for districts to get their data out and to be able to move it between different systems. And I guess, and that's part of what Project Unicorn is trying to push, is to make it easy for districts to have access to their own data. And yeah, great. Yeah, this is great. This is generating some good comments in the chat. And thank you, Chris. Yep, you're right. Most tech teams are IT. Yep, the data engineer types. And Eric, thanks for that point about flat files for rostering. And Chris, not a focus on the data part. Yes, the focus for a lot of IT departments is on the equipment and the network, and as opposed to districts who often have that internal software team. So yes, these are all extra points. So if there are any vendors who are listening to this call, again, the best way you can grow your business is to meet the needs of your customers, and interoperability and aligning to interoperability requirements is one way to help meet the needs of your customers. So yes, yeah, preach. All right, so we have time for just a few more questions. Again, if you have any other questions or comments in the chat, I'm loving this conversation. Please go ahead and move it. And yes, thank you. I see that Jonathan has shared the link to the recording from our first Money Moves webinar on utilizing different types of federal funding to build your modern data ecosystem. So absolutely. check out that recording. We'll also make this recording available, so please, we would love it if you would share this information with people who weren't able to attend today, because obviously this is information, and obviously this is a conversation that a lot of districts are having and want to have. So moving along, I think we have time for one or two more questions. This is a good one. What processes do you have in place to monitor the usage and evaluate the effectiveness of ed tech products that your district has purchased? I know we talked a little bit about some of the tools available to monitor usage, but how are you evaluating the effectiveness?
That's a bigger conversation, and that's one of the things that I'm excited about being part of. The interoperability framework pilot that Sharyar has allowed me to be a part of, because it's, as I mentioned earlier, those 6 domains are not just about moving data around, they're about how your organization functions. And this is one of those subsets of how the district functions. So we can provide the data, and we talked about some of those applications that show reporting on what applications are being used, but how do we tie that usage? And I don't think it's any surprise question. Most of us were struggling this year. What does engagement look like in a year when all of our students are off site? And so there was a huge wrestle with that. So coupling that engagement process with how effective are they is still something we're trying to sort out. Is it student growth? Is it student engagement? Or is it just click-throughs? I mean, but it's got to be that larger interoperation between your tech department, your teaching and learning departments, and what are the hopes that you're trying to get out of this? How are you going to measure those and monitor those, and then putting those questions into actionable data that you pull out of these interoperability efforts that we're all running so smoothly, right?
Yeah, I think also, I think a lot of the vendors are starting to provide that, but setting the expectation that you do want usage logs and these backend data that typically vendors keep for themselves, because they are monitoring what's being used and how it's being used and how often. But really, the school districts have the right to have that data and being able to analyze that data and evaluate it. Now, some vendors provide the analytics on top of that very nicely, but some don't. So you have to set that expectation even as early as when you sign the contract, when you evaluate the product, that you want to have usage information at a very detailed level. The experience I've had this last year and a half working with various districts, some very prominent software packages, at best, they may be able to just have a flat file that you have to go to the console and download, and it's limited to number of records that you can download, and the APIs are not available. But these usage logs are data, data that districts can use and be able to analyze effectively in evaluating the usage. But you have to, I think, combine that with survey, making sure that you're also getting the qualitative type of analysis as well, responses from the actual teachers, students that use the products as well.
Okay, I know we're just about on time, but we do have one final question that popped in the chat, so we'll go ahead and get to that. Sandra asked, how do you feel the market of EdTech products is doing to solve the problems you face? And once you're sure you need to use a tech product, how do you find and select the right product? Don or Sharyar?
I think the badges, I think, the alliances like EdFi, and the way they require vendors to certify. And now they're actually increasing that qualification level bar to a higher level to make sure that the vendors truly meet all requirements and maintaining, and keeping their software up to date with the newer versions and the most recent versions of EdFi, for example, EdFi ODS, for example. I think and they provide badges and certificates, on whether the vendor actually meets. I think those are key, and are helping quite a bit. And I think there's also, and that's one of the things we're trying to do from the district side, is put that pressure on the vendors that these features and functionalities, interoperability, having APIs, they need to be in place. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to compete, and you're not going to be able to win the RFPs. So that pressure from the district side, and that's why I was mentioning the Council of Great City Schools. 77 largest urban school districts in the country. I think they control about 70% of the procurement expenditures in K-12. And the reason the commitment of council being part of this program was so key, was so important, is that the pressure that the member districts can put on the vendors to adopt interoperability standards is very, very important, and it's going to be effective.
Yeah, I would just add that, and I go back to the banking industry because they were able to adopt a standard very quickly because they had federal oversight for how this is going to be laid out, and they had a government vested interest into making that happen. I bring that up because that was done decades ago, and we're all doing online banking, and it's all regulated and well oiled, and everything moves the way it should move with great pieces. Here we are in 2021, and one of the largest targets for cybersecurity attacks is the K-12 industry. And if there were a greater oversight, or if there were some of these regulations that we were similar, there hasn't been that interest to say, this is how K-12 is going to move their data around. Now, thank goodness for groups like Project Unicorn, COSIN, ISTE, EdFi Alliance that are trying to standardize and the one roster standard to make that more normalized so that we can do a better job of protecting our data. And again, it's going to continue to have to be us because we don't have that broader regulatory oversight on how our data moves around, even though it's becoming such a very popular target of bad actors to collect money from. So we will continue to work with this. This is why we're super excited about being involved with this project, because it gives voice and it gives impetus to why this work is critical and important.
Thank you so much, Don. And on that note, we're going to move to our final slide. Just wanted to share everyone's contact info if you would like to reach out to either of our presenters. Here's how you can find them via the interwebs and social platforms. And if you have any questions about interoperability or are looking for more information, please check out our website, which is projectunicorn.org. We do have a lot of resources, and we are continuing to collaborate with our colleague organizations. And don't forget to sign the Project Unicorn Pledge. So if you are a district and you think that interoperability is important, and I think if you're on this call, I think you probably do, make sure that you have signed the Project Unicorn Pledge so that you can have access to the Project Unicorn community and technical assistance from the Project Unicorn team. So with that, I believe we will, oh, and don't forget one more last final pledge to take the the school system data survey that Jonathan mentioned early on. So please do take the survey if you haven't already, and we would love for you to contribute. So thank you, Chris, for your very kind comment. This was great. We are so lucky to have these fabulous speakers. Thank you again, Don and Sharyar, for giving us your time today, your expertise, your wisdom, and for all the folks who were engaging in the webinar. You guys asked some terrific questions and made some great comments, and this was a lot of fun for us as well. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Project Unicorn event or webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.